Welcome into Full Throttle, the Presidio Group's automotive industry podcast. I'm your host, Jason Stein, managing director at Presidio. Great to have you back listening again with us.
You know, the households that represent 250,000 household incomes represents about 10% of this country's households. But that 10% represents between 49 and 50% of our economic stability and our stimulus. So think about that from a standpoint of 10% of our households drive almost 50% of our economy. Roughly 60% of the households are in that 65 to 150,000 income. They can't afford that $800 car or that,
right.
Take that average aggregate number of $800. You know, we can't drive this economy, Jason, to 18 million because we don't have the economic base to take that transaction at $50,000 and transition to 18 million cars and trucks.
Today's conversation is about leadership, not in theory, but in practice. My guest is Tom Castriota, president of Castriota Chevrolet and 2025 chairman of the National Automobile Dealers Association. In our conversation, just weeks before the end of his term, Tom reflects on what he heard from dealers across the country, the pressures on the franchise system, affordability, tariffs, workforce challenges, and the transition of leadership at NADA. It's a grounded conversation about service, stewardship, and the future of auto retail. It's about what dealers are actually worried about right now. And it's about what it takes to hold together a system built on trust, relationships, and long-term stewardship in a moment when almost everything feels short-term. This is a conversation about leadership without a spotlight and about responsibility without a headline, and about the future of an industry that touches nearly every household in America. My guest is Tom Castriota, and this is Full Throttle.
This is Tom Castriota, and this is Presidio's podcast, Full Throttle.
Has the year surprised you in ways you didn't expect?
Yeah, you know, I really didn't know what to expect other than I'll tell you what my real goal was to visit dealers throughout the country and on the international scene, to talk to dealers, Jason, what they face every day, how NADA could manage what our goals are. But of course, as we briefly talked earlier, I mean, the culmination for me in December going to the White House for the second time this year, the first time Mike Stanton and I went for the CRA signing to witness the president signing that. But most importantly, from an NADA position, to be invited by the White House to convey our position as the representative of our dealers throughout the country. And so I had a brief few minutes to tell the president the positives of the CAFE rule being changed. And so I think that's what NADA, I know that's what NADA is about. It's being the voice of the NADA dealers to not only our elected officials, but also to our state officials through our franchise laws. But back to our dealers and our manufacturers, Jason, we are the voice.
What did you get done that you really wanted to get done, and what did you not get done?
Oh, good question. What I did get done is I visited, let me tell you kind of a short story. So within our budget, the chairman has allowed 4 international trips. And because we are invited, when I say we, the chairman and Mike Stanton's position, we're invited to numerous international organizations and auto associations. So we try to keep that within a management side. But having been, through a year ago as a vice chair to China, Australia, Hungary, England to talk to the English dealers, South America, going through Brazil and Fenebrave, and then back over with the Italians, but also going to the Bahamas because that's where the New York auto dealers had their convention.
Right.
And Canada, as you know, because you were up there too for the
in Montreal
conference in Montreal, where the chairman always goes to do a presentation. But I will tell you, internally, going to Hawaii was kind of unique. Not that Hawaii is unique, but to fly 12 hours between connections and only spend 48 hours there because it wasn't a vacation for me. I wanted to talk to the Hawaiian dealers. I want to get their perspective of how they saw the world, so I can take it back. Because Stan, I can't even speak. Stan, who represents Hawaii, he can only convey so much when he comes to our board meetings. And when you think about someone traveling from Alaska and Hawaii to back to the East Coast, that's an all-day affair. So my point is, I probably had 30 different associations, numerous cities. I talked to every dealer I could talk to about what's on your mind. What do you see that's good? What are you frustrated with? Where do you see the industry? And then having the ability to talk to our economists, and not only our economists, but economists throughout other parts of our industry, whether it's your organization or Wall Street Journal. It's just interesting. But I think that the hardest part is uh, there are challenges to our franchise system, as you know, between Scout and Volkswagen, Honda, and potential in Sony, and then you have Rivian, you have Tesla, you have Lucid. It's not going to change, Jason, in the next few years.
And I'm guessing, let's just talk about that for a moment. The threat of direct sales hangs over the franchise system.
Sure.
And what happened in Colorado recently doesn't help it in any way. So what do dealers tell you around the country when you talk to them about their concerns? Is that the number one threat?
I will tell you that what I'm hearing in the last 3 months, a lot of, I'm a small or medium-sized dealer in rural United States.
Mm-hmm.
What's my future? And here's what I've been talking to dealers about since then, as I started to analyze this, Jason, is first of all, there's consolidation is not going to change. Consolidation is going to continue in our industry. But as long as we have franchise laws that protect our dealers from the OEM, and I'm not saying that on a negative, I'm saying it on a positive side, as long as that dealer is profitable and that dealer's meeting the standards of that OEM, they can't take that franchise away from you. And so because of that franchise law, I've told those dealers, don't be afraid. And this is what really started, was a dealer in upstate New York said, I want to make sure my son becomes my third generation at our store. What's my future? And this quite frankly, has led to many other questions from dealerships from Montana to North Dakota, South Dakota, Idaho. Take a rural area, or even rural Iowa. What's my future? Well, the future is, as long as you're managing your store and you're meeting the standards, franchise laws will protect you from that manufacturer going, says, we don't need you anymore.
And I'm guessing NADA's fight, and we've talked to Mike Stanton about this, but NADA's fight and the fight of all dealers will be unrelentless as things go forward. I'm sure you spent the last few months reminding everybody that this is not a battle that's going to end easily. That
is correct, and it'll be part of my speech too. When I do my speech at the show, and then the transition over to Rob. That it's about supporting the state's franchise laws. Because again, Jason, you know, and maybe there is some confusion, I think, from some dealers. NADA does not write franchise laws. We don't have a national franchise law. So we are in a position to support the states. So we can help them define what a law is good and take what's historically done through other states. You know, we're the conduit. But we don't dictate franchise laws. We don't write state franchise laws. And as you know, it's the same as we don't tell an OEM what to do. We can only be a conveyor of that message to the OEM through the dealer attitude survey.
Yeah. Affordability, you know, I think you're this, 60 something guest on this program, 61, 62. And I think our guest number one, Mike Maroney, 3 years ago, talked about affordability being an issue. And I think it's only gotten worse.
Yes,
Do you hear that when you're out talking to your various dealer
and
partners?
Yes. And I will tell you, it's part of my presentation, Jason. Everywhere I've been, whether it's international or at all the state associations or metros, is I take our economic evaluation. So I'll do this by memory. The households that represent 250,000 household incomes represents about 10% of this country's households. But that 10% represents between 49 and 50% of our economic stability and our stimulus. So think about that from a standpoint of 10% of our households drive almost 50% of our economy. And what you've just mentioned is...
That's staggering.
It is. And so that other roughly 60% of the households are in that 65 to 150,000 income, they can't afford that $800 car, or that,
Right.
if take that average aggregate number of $800, and a transition or transaction of $50,000, you could say 48, whatever, it's between those numbers. We can't drive this economy, Jason, to 18 million because we don't have the economic base to take that transaction at $50,000 and transition to 18 million cars and trucks. And maybe this is part of what the president's hoping with the CAFE rules, that a lot of those billions of dollars of investment could go in to build a $30,000 car or a $30,000 truck. Maybe that, and it didn't make sense, through COVID because there was no profit or very little profit there. And now that we're in this post period now, 5 years later, we're still building those expensive vehicles. That's where the profit is. And the profit was compensating for the loss on the EV side, Jason. So maybe if you look at it from that standpoint, I think if you take the manufacturer, I'll use Ford as an example. Farley said in the White House, in the Oval Office in December, is this rule changes, and now we can force, when I'm using his words, paraphrasing, is now they can build an affordable $30,000 vehicle and make some profit out of it. Now, if we can translate that into 3 or 4 million vehicles, now we're talking 17 to 18 million. But there aren't enough manufacturers building $25,000 to $30,000 cars.
They've gotten out of all of them. Yeah.
Right.
Related to affordability, and whether it's high interest rates, financing regulations, credit availability, shaping buyer behavior, you also were the chairman during a period of enormous conversation about tariffs.
True.
And tariffs and trade policy remain concerns because of the increased import duties that are raising vehicle prices for consumers. It's compressed volume to some extent. And I know NADA has worked to educate policymakers on how trade barriers affect affordability and supply. Where does that go from here? When you turn this over to Rob Cochran, what's your advice to him on tariffs, trade, and pricing?
I think the advantage that Rob and I had this year, I'll be very candid, when last year, right before, in our particular situation, there was a vote, so to speak. We had two candidates, two dealers running to become chairman, or in this case, vice chairman. And I had told Rob that if he became the vice chairman, he would be tied to my hip, Jason, that I wanted him to know everything that I was doing with Mike Stanton. And quite frankly, I gave him some responsibilities in that per se, because I knew some of the goals that I wanted to establish, I couldn't get them done in a year. And I wanted it to be under his leadership as well. So I gave him and I'm not saying this selfishly, but I just knew there were things that we worked together on would have to become under his chairmanship. So he was very much involved in everything we've done, and tariffs has been part of this. So I guess the answer to the question is, we will continue to use our legislative staff, our regulatory staff, and hopefully the dealers that we do in our September visit to the White House, or I'm sorry, to our legislative Washington visits in our conference. But we will continue to go to our regulators. We will go to the Treasury. We will go to the U.S. Trade. We will go to Ludnick and Hatch. We will do everything we can within our influence of being the voice of the dealers to our elected officials, those appointed by the White House. And I believe Rob will continue to do that, Jason, use Mike Stanton and his staff to be our voice. Look, we can't change the president's opinion or whatever his thoughts are. All we can do is influence him and his staff to help do the best we can. And probably the best way I can answer this in a short version is what we asked a year ago when President Trump was then elected again, that would he give these OEMs a bridge? And the bridge could be 18 months, 24 months, to allow them to bring their supply chains back, to bring those productions back that he's important. It's not only important for us, but it's also important for our national security that we have industry building things again, Jason.
Right. Right.
And so were we influential? At least we had a seat at the table, Jason. And maybe we made some points, maybe we didn't, but we were at the table. Workforce
challenges, recruiting, training, retaining skilled staff, especially Tom, in this rapidly evolving tech and service environment, over-the-air updates, it goes on and on. That has to be a priority for dealerships nationwide. Were you hearing that when you were out?
Oh, definitely. It was what can NADA do?
Right.
And now there are some things we can do and can't do, but let's say conversationally, we've had discussions. How would we approach a national technical school? Is that even conceivable? I mean, we're working with the National Urban League down in New Orleans for the last 3 years. We have some other areas that we're working with established tech schools that we could try to help them through scholarships. But yeah, I think that conversation is not going to change, Jason. I think under Rob's auspices too, this will continue to evolve. And here's another example. When I visited a lot of NADA's academies through their classes, and in the last 6 weeks, I've been through 4 graduations. But here's one that came up that I brought to staff. And the question was, how come NADA doesn't have an Hispanic Academy class for our executive managers? And so I brought that to Mike and staff several weeks back. And that's something that we are going to look at, is how do we pursue establishing an Hispanic Academy class within the NADA academies. I mean, so without a dealer bring that up, I mean, that's a conversation as chairman I can bring back to Mike and staff is, okay, what does it take? What is it going to do? And this is what I try to tell dealers. Your voice is important to us, whether it's NADA or pick a state association. But for myself, my personal view as chairman was to listen to that. And here's another example, Jason, that a dealer brought up in Hawaii. What happens with a state such as Hawaii that the state puts in a mandate, and I use these terms kind of figuratively, the last person to touch that electric battery when its lifespan is gone, who's responsible for that battery? Well, that was a good question, because the concern in Hawaii would be, since you're an island, and who's going to pay for that disposal or being responsible for that recycling of that battery through some process. So my comment back to Mike Stanton and staff was, is there a national policy? What happens if a state or the federal government says, you're the last one to touch it, you have to get rid of it? So, those are kind of things that I see, Jason, that dealers can bring to me and say, could we do something better, or why don't we do what we do? I think the biggest question I get is, how come we can't change an OEM? Well, that becomes antitrust, and we don't move down that course. Right. And I think there's a lot of dealers believe that NADA has this magic wand. We don't. But what we do have is a voice. Again, I'll use this figurative term. We have a voice at the table with the OEMs through our dealer attitude survey. And as you know, you've been around a long, long time. That voice can have a lot of effect. I can't say necessarily influence, but it certainly has been involved in many times that an OEM has changed its course because it's come to realize their dealers, it's not good for their dealers.
What are you going to do now? I guess you just get to sell cars every day, right?
Yeah, you sound like my wife. She said, "What are we going to do now?" We have a vineyard. We have a vineyard on the West Coast that she doesn't get as much as she could in the last 18 months. We sell grapes. We don't make our own wine. We make a private wine, but we don't sell that wine. But I think we'll do some more traveling out to the vineyard. Personally, I want to take drum lessons. So,
there we go. Okay.
And I have to tell you, when we were in Australia talking to the Australian dealers, they had and I really forget his name. He's an entrepreneur, had made a lot of money in the high tech world, and he's an extremely talented motivational speaker. He said, "Why do we as individuals have these goals, but we never do it?" And so his example was, he wanted to get his captain's license, so he did. He said, so then 2 years ago, he wanted to learn the drums. He said, a year later, I'm in a band playing in my drums. So you know what I said? But 2 years ago, my daughter, or maybe 3 years ago, she was in the music industry then. She got me someone to help me learn at least a couple lessons of playing the drums. So short stories, I think what I'm going to do is take some of my free time and learn how to play the drums.
drumming at a Friday night Florida bar near you.
Well, I could be like Rhett Reichert was in Ohio. Who has his little, Rhett is a very talented musician and guitarist.
Yes.
And Rhett did a lot of playing for us when he was chairman. So maybe
Well,
my goal though really is Jason to play at a church function on Sunday.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations
Thanks.
on your chairmanship through 2025, and in Las Vegas, you will hand the throne or pass the baton, I guess, as they say, over to Rob.
All right, can I tell you what we're going to do?
Yes.
I'm passing the torch.
Yeah, you're passing the torch. Exactly
We're
right.
starting a new tradition that I'm going to pass the torch to Rob, and Mr. Stanton's going to be the keeper of the torch. This is, to me, is whether you want to call it passing the keys.
Right.
I just thought that what's the biggest, passing a torch to Rob will be an honor, and for Rob to pass it to the next one, That's how I see it, Jason.
Wonderful.
I'll see you, and I'll see you there because we're together working on another idea that I had with Mike and Rob. Is we're going to have a leadership conference, and you're going to be part of that. And thank you for doing that.
No, thank you for asking me. I will be moderating the conversation with you and Rob and Mike Stanton, and in a closed door session, dealers only. We're gonna hear what's on most dealers' mind, and you're gonna talk about a lot of things you've talked about today, but probably even more. So,
thanks,
I appreciate it very much, Tom. Thank you for spending time with us today.
Thanks. I'll see you in a couple weeks. Thank you,
Tom. That's the 61st episode of Full Throttle. Special thanks to my guest, Tom Castriota, 2025 NADA Chairman. Thanks for listening. For our library of these episodes with industry leaders, go to thepresidiogroup.com. You can also find a library of these shows on the Presidio Group's YouTube channel. I'm your host, Jason Stein. We'll talk to you again next time.